An 85-year-old rancher refuses to sell his land. And that's when the gang war begins. In the quiet hills of Montana, a ruthless biker gang unleashes chaos. Cut fences, poisoned cattle, even hospitalizing the old man. But just when they think he's alone, his estranged grandson returns, trained, tactical, and deadly. What the gang didn't know? This wasn't just a ranch, it was a trap. And the old man, he's been planning for this moment all along. When a war erupts on sacred soil, can one soldier and one grandfather take down a criminal empire before it's too late? Before we begin, send a quick wave in the comments. Tell me your city, your country, your vibe. It's amazing how stories like this echo across the world. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Montana grasslands as Benny Hartwell stood on his front porch, his weathered hands gripping the wooden railing. 500 acres of ranch land stretched out before him, the same view he'd watched over for more than 6 decades. The gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of summer grass and the distant lowing of his cattle. The rumble of motorcycles broke the peaceful scene. 3 black bikes kicked up dust as they approached along the dirt road leading to his house. Benny's jaw tightened, but he didn't move from his spot. He'd been expecting them. The bikes pulled up in front of his porch and their riders dismounted. The leader, a tall man with broad shoulders and cold eyes, removed his helmet and stepped forward. Dante Reeves, leader of the Iron Wolves. Benny had heard plenty about him from neighbors who'd already been visited. "Mr. Hartwell?" Dante called out, his voice carrying a false note of respect. "Beautiful piece of land you've got here." "Been in my family for 3 generations," Benny replied evenly, his blue eyes steady despite his visitor's intimidating presence. Dante climbed the porch steps, his heavy boots thudding against the wood. He pulled an envelope from his leather jacket. "I'll get right to the point. We're interested in purchasing your property. The offer's more than fair, twice the market value." Benny didn't even glance at the envelope. The money didn't matter. This land wasn't just property to him. It was his legacy, his life's work, the place where he'd raised his family and built his dreams. "Not interested in selling," Benny said firmly. "To anyone? At any price?" Dante's friendly facade cracked slightly, a flash of anger crossing his face before he controlled it. "Mr. Hartwell, I understand your attachment to the place, but times are changing. Small ranches like yours are becoming harder to maintain. This offer would set you up comfortably for the rest of your life." "I'm comfortable right where I am," Benny responded, his voice carrying the quiet strength that had seen him through countless challenges over the years. The 2 men behind Dante shifted restlessly, their hands moving toward their jackets. Benny noticed, but didn't flinch. He'd faced down worse threats than these in his time. Dante leaned closer, dropping his voice. "Look, old man, you might want to reconsider. The area's getting dangerous these days. Accidents happen. Equipment breaks down. Cattle go missing. Would be a shame if something happened to this beautiful ranch of yours." Benny straightened up to his full height, his eyes hard as Montana flint. "I've worked this land for 65 years, young man. Survived droughts, blizzards, and market crashes. Raised 3 children here. Buried my wife here." His voice grew quieter, but more intense. "This ranch isn't for sale, not today, not ever." The tension crackled between them like static before a storm. Dante's face darkened, and for a moment Benny could see the true nature of the man beneath the businessman act. "You're making a mistake," Dante growled. "Nobody says no to me. Nobody." "First time for everything," Benny replied calmly. Dante crumpled the envelope in his fist and threw it onto the porch. "Last chance, old man. Take the offer, or things are going to get real uncomfortable around here." "I believe you know the way out," Benny said, turning his back on them and walking to his front door. It was a calculated risk, showing them his back, but he knew types like these. They wouldn't try anything. Not yet. The sound of angry muttering and heavy boots on wood followed, then the roar of motorcycles starting up. Benny waited until the noise faded into the distance before letting out a long breath. Inside his house, he moved to his study and sat down heavily in his old leather chair. His hands weren't quite as steady as they'd appeared during the confrontation. He knew what he'd just done, knew exactly what kind of danger he'd invited onto his land. The Iron Wolves had been systematically buying up ranches all along the Canadian border, and those who refused to sell often faced mysterious accidents or vandalism until they changed their minds. But Benny hadn't been bluffing. This land meant everything to him. The rolling hills where his children had learned to ride horses, the creek where he'd taught his grandson Marcus to fish before their falling out 5 years ago, the small cemetery where Sarah rested under the old oak tree. These weren't things he could put a price on. He reached for an old photograph on his desk, one showing him and Sarah on their wedding day, standing proud in front of the ranch house. "Looks like we've got another fight on our hands, old girl," he murmured, running his thumb across the image. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Benny stood at his window, watching the colors fade, while his mind worked. He might look like a vulnerable old man, but he hadn't survived 8 decades by being naive. If the Iron Wolves wanted a fight, they'd get one, just not the kind they were expecting. The morning after the Iron Wolves' visit, Benny found the first cut in his fence line. Clean cuts through the wire, clearly done with heavy-duty tools. He spent 3 hours in the hot sun repairing it, his hands working with practiced efficiency despite his age. By sunset, he'd found 2 more breaches. Over the next week, the attacks came with calculated precision. Every morning brought new damage. Cut fences appeared in different sections of his property, forcing him to spend hours checking the entire perimeter. His cattle wandered through the gaps, and he had to round them up alone, work that should have taken 3 men. The first threatening letter arrived tucked under his windshield wiper. "Accidents happen to stubborn old men," it read in block letters. Benny folded it carefully and added it to a new file in his desk drawer. When his prized Hereford bull got sick, Benny found traces of poison in the water trough. He spent 2 sleepless nights nursing the animal back to health, all while keeping watch for more sabotage. The veterinarian's bill ate into his savings, but he paid it without complaint. "You need to report this," said Sheriff Miller, when Benny finally went to town. They sat in the sheriff's office, where the air conditioning barely cut through the summer heat. "I am reporting it," Benny replied, laying out photographs of the damage. "Right now." The sheriff shuffled the photos without really looking at them. "Not much I can do without proof of who's doing it. Could be regular vandals, lots of troubled youth these days." Troubled youth with professional wire cutters and livestock poison? Benny's voice was quiet but sharp. Sheriff Miller wouldn't meet his eyes. "Times are tough, Mr. Hartwell. Maybe you should consider that offer you got. Retire somewhere peaceful." Benny stood up slowly. "This is where I find peace, Sheriff. Or used to." He gathered his photos and walked out, understanding now why none of his neighbors had found help from law enforcement. The harassment grew more personal. His mailbox was smashed one night. His truck's tires were slashed the next week. Each time the damage was precise and professional. No random vandalism, but calculated strikes designed to wear him down. Anonymous phone calls started coming at all hours, sometimes just breathing on the line, sometimes with detailed threats about what could happen to an old man living alone. Benny installed a new phone with caller ID, but the numbers were always different. One morning he found all his tools scattered across the barn floor, each one carefully arranged to spell out SELL. It must have taken hours in the night, but he'd slept through it all. The message was clear. They could get close anytime they wanted. The local feed store suddenly couldn't fill his orders. The fuel delivery service claimed their truck was down for repairs. Even some longtime neighbors began avoiding him, crossing the street when they saw him in town. The isolation grew like a shadow around his daily life. But Benny adapted. He drove an extra 40 miles to get his feed from another county. He stored extra fuel tanks in his barn. He developed new routines, changing his schedule randomly to make it harder for them to predict his movements. The ranch work didn't stop just because he was under siege. Cattle still needed feeding, fences still needed mending, and equipment still needed maintenance. Benny did it all while watching over his shoulder, his rifle never far from reach. One evening, as he was finishing his rounds, he found a fresh carcass, one of his younger steers, expertly butchered. The meat had been left to rot in the sun, a pure waste meant only to hurt him. Beside it lay another note. Next time it might not be a cow. That night, sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, Benny pulled out Sarah's old ledger. In her neat handwriting were records of every cattle sale, every expense, every detail of ranch life going back decades. He began making his own notes in the margins, dates, times, patterns of the attacks. The Iron Wolves were methodical, yes, but that meant they were also predictable. He started noticing things. The fence cutting always happened between 2 and 4 in the morning. The phone calls came from numbers in a specific area code. The vandals always avoided the southeast corner of his property, where an old logging road provided the best escape route. Each new act of intimidation brought more information. Benny recorded it all, building his own quiet pattern of intelligence. To anyone watching, he was just a stubborn old rancher, gradually being worn down by relentless pressure. But behind his weathered facade, Benny was gathering ammunition of a different sort. "Patience," he whispered to Sarah's photograph one night. "They think time is on their side, but they don't know what it means to work the land for 65 years. They don't understand the kind of patience that takes." The Iron Wolves continued their campaign, each week bringing new threats, new damage, new attempts to break his spirit. But with every attack, they revealed more about themselves, never suspecting that the old man they were trying to chase off was taking careful notes, building a case, and waiting for the right moment to strike back. The bell above Wilson's feed store chimed as Benny pushed through the heavy wooden door. The familiar smell of grain and leather filled his nostrils as he made his way down the narrow aisle. It was early afternoon, and the store was unusually quiet. Even Mary Wilson, who usually kept up a steady stream of friendly chatter from behind the counter, seemed tense today. "Just the usual order, Mary," Benny said, trying to keep his voice light. 200 pounds of cattle feed and some mineral blocks. Mary wouldn't meet his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hartwell. We're all out of feed today." Benny looked past her to the towering stacks of feed bags clearly visible in the storage area. "Now, Mary, I can see—" The bell chimed again. 3 men in leather vests entered, spreading out to block the exit. Benny recognized the Iron Wolves' patches on their backs. His muscles tensed, but he kept his face neutral. Decades of ranch work helping him maintain his composure. "Well, if it isn't the stubborn old-timer," the largest of the 3 said, moving closer. "Still haven't learned your lesson?" Mary disappeared into the back room without a word. Through the window, Benny saw other customers hurrying to their vehicles, faces turned away. The street outside grew mysteriously empty. "I'm just here for feed," Benny said calmly, though his heart was pounding. "No need for trouble." The big man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Trouble found you weeks ago, old man. You just haven't been smart enough to recognize it." They moved with practiced coordination, herding him away from the door and into the back corner of the store. Benny's mind raced, cataloging details even as fear crept up his spine. The leader had a distinctive scar above his right eyebrow. The youngest wore expensive boots that had never seen real ranch work. The third had a tattoo of a wolf on his neck. "Last chance," Scar said, cracking his knuckles. "Sign the papers. Take the money. Disappear." Benny straightened his shoulders, his 85 years of life giving him a dignity they couldn't touch. That land's not for sale. Not to you, not to anyone. The first blow caught him in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. He tried to protect himself, but they were too many and too strong. His right arm came up defensively, only to be grabbed and twisted until something snapped. Pain exploded through his body as he fell to the floor. They were careful, he realized, through the haze of pain. The kicks and punches were placed where they wouldn't show under clothing. Professional violence meant to hurt, but not kill. Not yet. Next time won't be just a warning, Scar said, standing over him. Sell the ranch, or we'll put you in the ground next to your wife. They left him there on the feed store floor, the bell chiming cheerfully as they departed. Minutes passed before Mary crept back in, tears streaming down her face as she dialed 911. The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and motion. At the hospital, doctors confirmed what Benny already knew. His right arm was broken, along with 2 ribs. The bruises would take weeks to heal. Sheriff Miller showed up while they were setting Benny's arm. "Got a description of these men?" he asked, not bothering to take out his notepad. "3 of them," Benny said through gritted teeth. "Iron wolves' patches. One had a scar." "Now, Mr. Hartwell," the sheriff interrupted, "let's not jump to conclusions. Could have been any rough characters passing through, unless you got witnesses willing to confirm your story." Benny looked at the sheriff's carefully blank face. Mary Wilson saw them. "Mary says she was in the back room the whole time. Didn't see or hear anything." The sheriff shrugged. "Nobody else seems to remember seeing anything unusual today either." The message was clear. No help would come from official channels. The Iron Wolves' influence ran deep, and fear ran deeper. Later that night, alone in his hospital room, Benny stared out the window at the distant mountains. His arm throbbed in its cast, each breath sending sharp pains through his ribs. On the bedside table, a new note had appeared during his brief trip to the bathroom. They could reach him anywhere. The nurses whispered in the hallway, their voices carrying through the thin door. They spoke of other accidents that had happened to people who crossed the Iron Wolves, of businesses burned down, of families that had fled in the night, of evidence that disappeared from police lockups. Benny closed his eyes, remembering Sarah's words from long ago. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is survive. He'd survived drought, blizzards, market crashes, and the loss of his beloved wife. He would survive this too. But as he lay there in the sterile hospital room, his battered body a testament to the Iron Wolves' brutality, Benny understood that simple survival might not be enough. The stakes had changed. The violence would only escalate from here. Marcus Hartwell's breath formed small clouds in the crisp Colorado morning as he demonstrated proper fire-starting techniques to his wilderness survival class. His 8 students huddled around, watching intently as the small flame caught the carefully arranged tinder. "Remember," he said, his instructor's voice carrying across the mountain clearing, "in survival situations, fire means life. It's not just about staying warm. It's about signaling for help, purifying water, and keeping predators away." The familiar weight of his satellite phone pressed against his hip, a necessary safety measure for these remote training sessions. As if sensing his thoughts, it began to vibrate. Marcus rarely received calls during class and never on this emergency line. "Take 5, everyone," he said, stepping away from the group. "Practice your techniques, but don't waste the tinder." The caller ID showed a Montana area code. His heart skipped a beat. He hadn't received a call from his home state in 5 years. Not since that final argument with his grandfather. "This is Marcus Hartwell." "Marcus? It's Dr. Reynolds from St. Vincent's Hospital in Billings." The voice was gentle but urgent. "Your grandfather was admitted today. He's been attacked." Marcus's free hand clenched into a fist. "How bad?" "Broken arm, broken ribs, extensive bruising. He's stable, but..." The doctor paused. "Given his age and the nature of the attack, we felt obligated to contact his next of kin." Next of kin. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He was all Grandpa Benny had left, and he'd walked away 5 years ago. "I'll be there," Marcus said, his military training taking over, pushing emotions aside to focus on logistics. "Keep him safe." After ending the call, Marcus stood motionless for a moment, memories washing over him. The last time he'd seen his grandfather was at the ranch, 5 years ago, just after his parents' funeral. The argument still burned in his mind. "Running away to play soldier?" Benny had shouted, grief making his words sharp as razors. "Your parents are barely in the ground, and you're abandoning everything they built." "I'm not running away," Marcus had fired back. "I'm serving my country. Mom and Dad would have understood that." "This ranch is your heritage, boy. Your responsibility." "I'm not a boy anymore, and I never asked for this responsibility." He'd walked away that day, enlisted, channeled his grief into becoming the best soldier he could be. Special Forces training, Green Beret, multiple deployments, he'd excelled at everything except facing what he'd left behind. Marcus turned back to his students, his decision already made. "Class, something's come up. Family emergency." He pulled out his phone again, already texting his backup instructor. "Dave will be here in 30 minutes to continue the lesson." The drive back to his cabin was a blur of mountain switchbacks and memories. Inside, he moved with military efficiency, packing essentials into his go bag. Old habits died hard. He found himself doing a weapons check before remembering he wasn't deploying to a combat zone. He was just going home. Home. The word felt strange after so long away. Marcus's small cabin was Spartanly furnished, reflecting both his military background and his nomadic lifestyle. The only personal touch was a single framed photo on the bedside table. Himself as a teenager, standing between his parents in front of the ranch house, Grandpa Benny's arm around his shoulders. They were all smiling. His parents' death had shattered that happiness. A head-on collision with a drunk driver, both killed instantly. Marcus had been 23, fresh out of college, uncertain about his future. The ranch had felt like a trap then, the weight of family legacy too heavy to bear. Now, at 28, that weight felt different. Not lighter, but more like a responsibility he'd been wrong to abandon. The drive to Montana would take at least 10 hours. Marcus threw his bag into his four-wheel drive truck, the vehicle a necessity for his work in the Colorado wilderness. The familiar routine of checking gauges and adjusting mirrors gave his hands something to do while his mind raced. What would he say to his grandfather? What could he say after 5 years of silence? The military had taught him to face any challenge head-on, but this was different. This was family. As Marcus pulled onto the highway heading north, his satellite phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Dr. Reynolds, patient insisting on checking himself out against medical advice. Marcus shook his head, a mix of frustration and admiration tightening his jaw. Same old stubborn Grandpa Benny. Some things never changed. The morning sun cast long shadows across the road as Marcus pressed down on the accelerator. His wilderness survival classes, his comfortable life in Colorado, all of it could wait. Right now, his grandfather needed him, whether the proud old man would admit it or not. 5 years of distance dissolved with every mile marker that flew past. Marcus was going home, carrying a weight of guilt and responsibility that no amount of military training had prepared him for. But he was done running. Whatever awaited him in Montana, he would face it head-on. Marcus's truck rolled down the gravel road toward his grandfather's ranch just as the Montana sun began to set. His hands tightened on the steering wheel at the sight of cut fence lines and scattered cattle. The damage was worse than he'd imagined. A police cruiser sat parked in front of the weathered ranch house, and Marcus's military instincts immediately registered something off about the scene. Deputy Chief Ramon Vasquez stood on the porch, his posture too casual as he talked to Benny, who looked small and frail in his arm sling. Marcus parked and stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. Vasquez turned, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon, before relaxing into an artificial smile. "Well, look who's back," Vasquez called out. "The prodigal grandson returns?" Marcus ignored him, focusing on his grandfather. Benny stood straight-backed despite his injuries, his weathered face unreadable. 5 years had carved deeper lines around his eyes and mouth. "Grandfather," Marcus said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. "Marcus?" Benny's voice was gruff, but controlled. Didn't expect to see you? Dr. Reynolds called me. Waste of his time, I'm fine. Vasquez chuckled, the sound setting Marcus's teeth on edge. Just explaining to your grandfather that we're doing everything we can about these unfortunate incidents. Incidents? Marcus's voice was sharp. He was assaulted. Without witnesses or evidence, there's not much we can do. Vasquez shrugged. Sometimes these things happen in cattle country, rough characters passing through. The deputy's dismissive tone made Marcus's combat-trained senses spike. Everything about Vasquez's body language screamed wrong. The way he positioned himself, his carefully crafted indifference. You're not even going to investigate? Marcus asked. Already did. Vasquez smiled, all teeth and no warmth. Nothing to find. Your grandfather should consider himself lucky. Some folks would take this as a sign to sell up and move somewhere safer. The threat was barely veiled. Marcus stepped onto the first porch step, deliberately entering Vasquez's personal space. That sounds almost like a suggestion, Deputy Chief. Just looking out for a respected member of our community. Vasquez backed away, maintaining his fake smile. Think about it, Mr. Hartwell. Both of you. They watched in silence as Vasquez drove away, dust billowing behind his cruiser. He's in their pocket, Marcus said. You always were quick on the uptake. Benny turned and pushed open the screen door. Might as well come in. The house smelled exactly as Marcus remembered, coffee, leather, and the lingering scent of wood smoke. He followed his grandfather into the kitchen, noting the untouched medical supplies on the counter. You need to let me change those bandages, Marcus said. What I need is for you to mind your own business. Benny's good hand shook slightly as he reached for the coffee pot. Nobody asked you to come charging back here. You were attacked. Nothing I can't handle? Marcus stepped forward and took the coffee pot from his grandfather's unsteady grip. Like you're handling those bandages? Or the cut fences? Or the fact that local law enforcement is clearly corrupted? Managed fine for 85 years without your help? Benny's voice was bitter. Including the last 5. The words hit their mark. Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee, buying time to control his response. I know you're angry. Angry? Benny barked out a harsh laugh. Boy, I was angry 5 years ago. Now I'm just tired. Marcus set the coffee cups down harder than necessary. Then, sell the ranch. These people aren't going to stop. There it is. Benny's eyes flashed. Run away? That's your solution to everything, isn't it? It's not running away, it's tactical retreat. These people are dangerous. This land is our legacy. It's not worth dying for. They stared at each other across the kitchen table, 5 years of unspoken words hanging between them. Your parents would never have sold, Benny said quietly. Marcus turned away, moving to the window. The setting sun cast long shadows across the pastures, highlighting the damaged fences and empty corrals. His tactical assessment was automatic. Too many approach vectors, insufficient security, multiple vulnerabilities. The ranch was practically indefensible. I'm not here to fight, Marcus said finally. I'm here to help, whether you want it or not. And then what? You'll run back to Colorado once you've eased your conscience? Marcus turned back to his grandfather. In the fading light, he could see past the stubborn pride to the exhaustion underneath. The old man was hurting, and not just from his physical injuries. I don't know, Marcus answered honestly. But right now, you're in danger, so I'm staying. Benny studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Spare room's where you left it, probably dusty. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was a start. Marcus picked up his coffee cup, understanding that for now, this was the best they could manage. Vasquez left with another dismissive wave, and Marcus watched the police cruiser disappear down the dusty road. Inside the ranch house, Benny moved slowly to his favorite leather armchair, wincing as he sat. You should have called me, Marcus said, standing by the stone fireplace where family photos still hung. His own face stared back at him from years ago, alongside his parents. Why? So you could rush back and try to convince me to sell? Benny's eyes were sharp despite his injured state. That's what you're thinking, isn't it? Marcus ran a hand through his hair. It's not safe for you here anymore. This isn't just about me. Benny reached for a folder on the side table, his movements careful with his broken arm. Take a look. Inside were newspaper clippings and handwritten notes. Marcus spread them on the coffee table, his military training kicking in as he analyzed the pattern emerging from the documents. 3 neighboring ranches had been sold in the past 18 months. The Hendersons to the north, the Whitakers on the eastern border, and the Rodriguez family's place backing up to the forest. All these sales to shell companies, Marcus muttered, connecting the dots. Different names, but similar patterns of harassment before each sale. The Iron Wolves are building something bigger than just taking my land. Benny's voice was steady. Look at the map. Marcus unfolded a local territory map marked with Benny's careful handwriting. The 3 sold properties created a nearly continuous corridor from the Canadian border through the remote Montana wilderness. Only the Hartwell Ranch interrupted the chain. It's a drug trafficking route, Marcus said, his tactical mind assembling the pieces. These remote properties, the access to back roads, the proximity to the border, they're creating a secure corridor. And my land is the missing piece. Benny leaned forward. The Hendersons were here for 3 generations. Maria Rodriguez's grandfather built that ranch with his bare hands. The Whitakers' kids grew up with you. Marcus studied the map more closely, remembering summer days spent playing with the Whitaker children, Sunday dinners with the Rodriguez family. They were forced out? Accidents, equipment failures, livestock disappearing, then the violence. Benny's good hand clenched. They didn't just lose their ranches, son. They lost their homes, their community, their legacy. Moving to the window, Marcus looked out over the familiar landscape. The setting sun painted the mountains purple, the same view he'd grown up with. But now he saw it through new eyes, noting defensive positions, possible approach routes, surveillance points. These people aren't just thugs, he said. They're organized, patient. They've been systematically taking over key properties to build their operation. And destroying families in the process. Benny's voice carried decades of connection to the land and its people. I've known these folks my whole life, watched their children grow up, helped them through droughts and hard winters. This land isn't just acres and buildings, it's a community. Marcus turned back to his grandfather, seeing not the stubborn old man he'd argued with 5 years ago, but a pillar of the community fighting to protect more than just his own interests. The sheriff's department? Vasquez isn't the only one they've bought. Benny shook his head. They've been working on this for years, setting up their pieces. Moving back to the coffee table, Marcus began organizing the documents with military precision. Tell me everything you know about their operations. Numbers, patterns, key players. Now you sound like a soldier again. There was a hint of their old argument in Benny's voice. Marcus met his grandfather's eyes. Maybe that's exactly what this situation needs. These people are running a tactical operation, property acquisition, intelligence gathering, systematic intimidation. They're fighting a campaign, not just throwing punches. And you think you can stop them? Benny's question carried both doubt and hope. I think we need to try. Not just for this ranch, but for everyone they've hurt. Marcus gestured to the photos on the wall. You always taught me that being part of this community meant standing up for what's right. Benny studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The Iron Wolves hold their meetings at the old lumber mill. They've got at least 30 members locally. More they can call in from other chapters. Dante Reeves, their leader, he's smart, patient. He plays the long game. Marcus pulled out his phone and began making notes, his special forces training surfacing as he gathered intelligence. We'll need to document everything, build a case that even corrupt cops can't ignore. And in the meantime, we need to secure this property. Looking around the ranch house where he'd grown up, Marcus felt the weight of what they were fighting for. This wasn't just about protecting one old man's ranch. It was about standing up for a way of life, for the families who'd already lost everything, for the community his grandfather had helped build and maintain for decades. I'll need to make some calls, he said. There are people who can help, people who can't be bought. Benny nodded, understanding passing between them. The argument that had driven them apart 5 years ago seemed to fade in the face of this larger threat. They weren't just grandfather and grandson now. They were allies in a fight that was bigger than both of them. The night sky glowed orange as flames consumed Benny's barn. Marcus sprinted across the yard, his military training taking over as he assessed the situation. The old wooden structure crackled and roared, sending sparks into the dark Montana sky. "The cattle!" Benny shouted from behind him, his broken arm clutched to his chest. "They're still in the north pasture." Through the smoke, Marcus could see the herd growing restless, illuminated by the inferno. The fire cast dancing shadows across the frightened animals as they moved nervously along the fence line. A pickup truck's headlights swept across the property, and Marcus recognized Jenny Morrison's veterinary logo on the door. She had been checking on their injured cattle daily since the Iron Wolves' previous attacks. "Stay here," Marcus ordered his grandfather, already moving toward Jenny's truck. "Call the fire department." But before Jenny could step out of her vehicle, 2 motorcycles roared up the access road, their riders wearing the distinctive leather vests of the Iron Wolves. They cut off her escape route, forcing her to swerve toward the burning barn. Marcus's combat instincts surged. He counted 4 gang members total as 2 more emerged from the shadows near the barn carrying gas cans. The pieces clicked together. This wasn't just about the fire. They were waiting for anyone who responded. Jenny scrambled out of her truck, but one of the bikers grabbed her arm. "Going somewhere, Doc?" he sneered, yanking her roughly. Marcus moved like a shadow, using the smoke and confusion as cover. 5 years of Special Forces training narrowed his world to a series of tactical decisions. The first biker never saw him coming. A quick strike to the back of the knee, followed by a precise chokehold. The gang member slumped silently to the ground, 1 down. "Let her go!" Marcus called out, his voice carrying the authority of command. The remaining Iron Wolves turned toward him, momentarily distracted. Jenny seized the opportunity, driving her elbow into her captor's solar plexus. Marcus closed the distance in 3 rapid strides. A sharp kick sent the second biker sprawling, his grip on Jenny released. "Get to the house." Marcus pushed Jenny toward safety, then spun to face the remaining threats. The third Iron Wolf charged, swinging a chain. Marcus slipped inside his guard, redirecting the weapon's momentum. A precise strike to the throat dropped the attacker, gasping. The 4th gang member pulled a knife, its blade reflecting the barn fire's glow. "You're dead, soldier boy," he snarled. Marcus's response was methodical. Block, disarm, strike. The knife clattered to the ground, followed by its owner. 4 attackers neutralized in less than 2 minutes. Jenny stared at him, her professional composure shaken but intact. That was impressive. "Military training," Marcus said simply, "securing the unconscious gang members with their own belts. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay." She brushed dirt from her jeans, then looked toward the barn with determination. "But we need to save what we can." The fire department's sirens wailed in the distance as they rushed to the house. Benny met them at the door, his face grim but composed. "The cattle?" Jenny asked immediately. "Safe in the north pasture," Benny confirmed. "But my winter hay supply was in that barn. Feed, equipment, everything." Marcus watched the barn collapse in on itself, understanding the devastating blow to his grandfather's livelihood. Without feed for the winter, Keeping the cattle healthy would be nearly impossible. I can help coordinate with other ranchers, Jenny offered, her professional confidence returning. We can arrange emergency feed supplies, maybe even temporary shelter for some of the herd. Marcus studied her, seeing more than just a veterinarian. She understood the community, had connections, and most importantly, showed courage under pressure. You're taking a risk, helping us, he said. Jenny met his gaze steadily. These people have been terrorizing good folks for too long. Someone has to stand up to them. They'll be back, Benny said, watching as fire trucks pulled onto the property. This was a message. Then we'll send one back, Marcus replied, his tactical mind already formulating plans. He turned to Jenny. We could use your help. You know the local ranchers, the patterns of what's been happening. She nodded without hesitation. Whatever you need. I've watched them drive out too many families already. The fire department fought the blaze, but the barn was already a total loss. Marcus stood with his grandfather and Jenny, watching years of work burn to ash. But as he looked at the determined faces beside him, he saw something else emerging from the destruction, an alliance. We document everything, Marcus said, his special forces training surfacing in his voice. Every incident, every threat. We build a case they can't ignore or bury. And protect each other while we do it, Jenny added, her earlier fear replaced by resolve. Benny placed his good hand on Marcus's shoulder. Looks like those military skills of yours might come in handy after all, son. The fire blazed against the night sky, a beacon of the Iron Wolves' escalating violence. But they had unknowingly created something else, a team ready to fight back. The morning after the barn fire, Marcus sat at his grandfather's kitchen table with Jenny, sorting through papers and photos she had brought. Steam rose from their coffee cups as early sunlight streamed through the window. These are all the incidents I've documented, Jenny said, spreading out photographs of injured cattle and damaged property. Not just on your grandfather's ranch, but across the whole county. Marcus studied the images with a tactical eye. This is methodical. Too organized for a regular motorcycle gang. Jenny nodded, pushing her hair behind her ear. That's what caught my attention. The Iron Wolves showed up about 18 months ago. At first, they seemed like typical troublemakers. But their tactics... She paused, selecting another photo. Everything they do has a purpose. Tell me about the other ranches they forced out, Marcus said, noticing how Jenny's professional demeanor masked her obvious concern. 3 families in the past year. The Hendersons were first. Their place is 10 miles north. Then the Wilsons and the Ramirez family. Jenny pulled out a map, pointing to each location. They all refused to sell, just like your grandfather. Then the accident started. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, scanning the damaged barn in the morning light. These aren't accidents. This is a professional operation. What makes you so sure? Jenny asked, her initial skepticism about the prodigal grandson showing in her voice. Marcus turned back to face her. I've seen similar patterns before, during my deployments. Criminal organizations use local gangs as cover for their operations. The Iron Wolves are just the visible face of something bigger. Jenny's eyes widened as she connected the dots. The Canadian border is less than 50 miles north, and with the remote ranches being bought up, they're creating a corridor, Marcus finished, perfect for moving product without detection. But who would have the resources to orchestrate something this large? Jenny asked, her veterinarian's practicality showing through. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her several news articles he had found. The Sinaloa cartel has been expanding their operations in Montana. They're looking for new routes since border security tightened in Texas and Arizona. Jenny leaned closer to read, and Marcus caught the faint scent of her shampoo. Despite the serious situation, he found himself noticing how her presence brought a warmth to the kitchen that had been missing for years. Look at this, she said suddenly, pulling out more documentation. The company trying to buy these ranches, Iron Wolf Holdings. Their paperwork traces back to shell corporations in Mexico? Marcus nodded grimly. The Iron Wolves aren't just thugs on motorcycles. They're working for one of the most dangerous cartels in North America. Jenny sat back, running her hands through her hair. This is bigger than I thought. Much bigger. She looked at Marcus with new respect. No wonder you recognize the pattern. Special Forces training teaches you to look for these connections, Marcus explained. The cartels use the same tactics worldwide. Find vulnerable areas, apply pressure through local criminals, then establish trafficking routes. So what do we do? Jenny asked. The local police won't help. They're either scared or bought off. Marcus began organizing the evidence into clear categories. We document everything, build a case too big for them to ignore, but we need more proof of the cartel connection. I can help with that, Jenny offered. I travel to all the ranches in the area. No one questions a vet checking on livestock. Marcus studied her with concern. It could be dangerous. These people don't mess around. Jenny met his gaze steadily. I've been watching them destroy this community for 18 months. These aren't just clients. They're my friends, my neighbors. She gestured to the photos. I've already been collecting evidence. I just didn't know what I was looking at until now. Marcus felt a surge of admiration for her courage. Here was someone who had stayed and fought while he had run away. We'll need to be careful. Set up secure ways to share information. I can do that, Jenny said, her professional confidence showing through, and I have contacts at other ranches who will help. People who trust me. They spent the next hour creating a systematic plan for gathering intelligence. Jenny's knowledge of the local community complemented Marcus's tactical experience perfectly. You know, Jenny said as they finished, when I heard Benny's soldier grandson was coming back, I thought you'd just try to convince him to sell and leave. Marcus felt the sting of her words, but acknowledged their truth. That was the plan, he admitted. But seeing what these people are doing, understanding what's really at stake, he gestured to their collected evidence. This isn't just about one ranch anymore. Jenny smiled for the first time that morning. No, it's not. And maybe that's why you're really here. As they looked at each other across the table covered with evidence of the cartel's operation, Marcus realized their partnership had shifted into something more than just a tactical alliance. They were two people committed to protecting a community, each bringing their own strengths to the fight. Late that evening, Marcus found his grandfather sitting in his study surrounded by stacks of notebooks and folders. The old man's weathered hands moved with surprising precision as he organized papers in the dim lamplight. Grandpa, Jenny and I discovered something about the Iron Wolves. They're connected to the Sinaloa cartel, Benny finished, not looking up from his work. And Ramon Vasquez isn't just a corrupt deputy chief, he's Dante Reeves's half-brother. Marcus stared at his grandfather, thrown completely off balance. How did you... Benny finally looked up, his eyes sharp and alert despite the late hour. Come here, son. There's something you need to see. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick leather-bound journal. Inside were detailed notes, dates, photographs, and maps, all meticulously organized and annotated. I've been tracking their operations for 18 months, Benny explained, his voice steady and certain. Every meeting, every property purchase, every accident that forced good people off their land. Marcus picked up one of the photographs. It showed Dante Reeves and Deputy Chief Vasquez meeting behind an abandoned gas station. You knew about this all along? Known since the beginning. Benny pulled out another folder. Their mother, Maria Vasquez, worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy rancher named Richard Reeves 30 years ago. Had 2 sons by him, Dante and Ramon. Richard paid to keep it quiet, sent them money for years. Marcus sat down heavily in the old leather chair. So this whole time, while they've been threatening you, destroying property? I've been gathering evidence, Benny finished, building a case nobody can ignore. These aren't just random attacks. They're systematically creating a drug corridor. 500 miles of unpatrolled ranch land from the Canadian border straight down to their distribution networks. But the broken arm, the threats. Marcus struggled to reconcile the frightened victim he'd imagined with the strategic mastermind sitting before him. Benny's eyes crinkled with a hint of satisfaction. Had to make it convincing. They needed to believe I was just a stubborn old man who didn't know when to quit. Made them sloppy, made them reveal more than they meant to. Marcus leafed through the journal, seeing page after page of detailed observations, times, dates, license plate numbers, photographs taken with a long-range lens. This is professional-level surveillance work. You think you're the only one in this family who served? Benny asked with a slight smile. Before I took over the ranch, I spent 10 years in Army intelligence. Your grandmother used to say I never lost the habit of watching and waiting. The pieces started falling into place in Marcus's mind. The other ranchers who sold, you were documenting those cases too? Everyone. Benny pulled out another file. Got enough here to prove pattern and method, show how they targeted vulnerable properties, applied pressure, forced sales through shell companies, all leading back to the cartel's operation. Marcus studied his grandfather with new eyes, seeing past the weathered exterior to the sharp mind beneath. Why didn't you tell me? Needed your genuine reaction when you came home, Benny explained. If you'd known I was running an operation, you might have played it differently. Your anger at finding me hurt, your frustration with the local police, all that helped sell the story. Jenny's been helping you too, hasn't she? Marcus asked, remembering how easily she'd shared her documentation. She's been my eyes and ears across the county. No one questions a vet visiting different ranches. She's gathered more evidence than I ever could alone. Marcus shook his head, still processing this revelation. All this time I thought I was coming back to protect you. You did protect me, Benny said softly. That's exactly what I needed. My Green Beret grandson rushing home to defend his helpless grandfather. Made them focus on you instead of looking too closely at what I was doing. And now? Now we have enough to take them down. Benny patted the stacks of evidence. Not just the local operation, but their whole network. Proof of corruption, drug trafficking, money laundering, everything tied up neat and documented. Marcus looked at his grandfather with newfound respect. You're not just fighting to keep your ranch, you're taking down their entire operation. This land, this community, it's worth fighting for, Benny said firmly. Sometimes the best way to fight isn't with fists or guns. Sometimes you have to be patient, watch, and wait for your enemy to show their hand. Marcus remembered the bitter argument that had driven him away 5 years ago, how he'd accused his grandfather of being stuck in the past, unwilling to change. Now he saw the truth. Benny hadn't been stuck, he'd been standing his ground, protecting something worth fighting for in his own way. So what's our next move? Marcus asked, ready to follow his grandfather's lead. Now, Benny said, his eyes gleaming with purpose, we spring the trap. The first gunshot shattered the evening calm. Marcus instinctively pushed Jenny down behind the solid oak kitchen counter as more bullets peppered the ranch house's exterior. 20 of them, he reported, quickly scanning the property through the window. They've got us surrounded. The setting sun cast long shadows across the yard, making it harder to track all the attackers' positions. Benny remained oddly calm, moving with deliberate purpose toward the old hope chest in the living room. They found my surveillance equipment in the north pasture, he said, unlocking the chest with a key from his pocket. Guess my cover's finally blown. We need to get to better defensive positions, Marcus said, his special forces training kicking in as he assessed their situation. The ranch house's wooden walls wouldn't hold up long against sustained gunfire. Already got that covered, Benny replied, throwing open the chest. Inside lay an impressive array of weapons, hunting rifles, shotguns, and boxes of ammunition, all meticulously organized. Been preparing for this possibility for months? Jenny stared at the stockpile. Benny, how long have you been planning for this? Since the day they first threatened my land? He started distributing weapons with practiced efficiency. There's more cached throughout the house. Gun safe in the master bedroom, rifle rack hidden in the pantry, ammunition stored in every room. Marcus watched his grandfather with newfound appreciation. The frail old man act had been just that, an act. Every move Benny made showed the precision of someone who'd never really left his military training behind. Another burst of gunfire hit the house, this time from multiple directions. They're coordinating their attack, Marcus observed, moving in teams. Good thing I've been coordinating our defense, Benny replied. He pulled out a rolled-up blueprint of the ranch house. Made some modifications over the past year, reinforced the walls in key places, installed bulletproof glass in strategic windows, created firing positions with good cover. Jenny checked the shotgun Benny had handed her. I'm not much of a shot, she admitted. You don't have to be, Marcus assured her. Just keep their heads down while we move to better positions. He turned to Benny. What's our best defensive setup? Second floor gives us the advantage, Benny said, pointing to the blueprint. I've got hardened positions in the master bedroom and guest room. Good angles on all approaches. Basement has emergency supplies and a reinforced panic room if we need it. The sound of engines roaring indicated more iron wolves arriving. Marcus peered out carefully. They're bringing in heavier weapons. We need to move now. Take the rear staircase, Benny directed. Less exposed than the main stairs. Jenny, stay between us. Marcus, there's a gun safe in the upstairs hall. Combination is your mother's birthday. They moved quickly through the house as bullets continued to strike the exterior. Marcus led the way, checking corners and angles, just as he had done countless times in combat. Jenny followed his instructions precisely, showing remarkable composure under fire. Benny brought up the rear, moving with surprising agility for his age. Reaching the second floor, they could better see the Iron Wolves' positions through the growing darkness. Flashlight beams swept the property as gang members moved between covered positions. They're trying to find our blind spots, Marcus said, quickly opening the gun safe with the combination. Inside, he found night vision equipment and more ammunition. You really did think of everything? Had plenty of time to plan while playing the helpless victim, Benny replied with a grim smile. He moved to a reinforced window position, setting up with a clear view of the main approach. Been adding little improvements every month. Amazing what you can do when everyone thinks you're just a stubborn old man making repairs. Jenny took up position in the guest room, covering the eastern exposure. They're moving closer to the barn, she reported. Looks like they're setting up some kind of base there. Marcus quickly organized their resources, distributing the night vision equipment and extra ammunition. We need to pace ourselves, he advised. This is going to be a long night. Got food and water stored up here too, Benny said, and a satellite phone hidden in the attic. But we need to hold out long enough for the right moment to call in help. A massive explosion rocked the front of the house. The Iron Wolves had brought heavier ordnance. The reinforced walls held, but the message was clear. This was just the beginning. They'll try to wear us down, Marcus said, setting up his firing position. Probe our defenses, look for weaknesses. Benny checked his weapon with practiced ease. Then we'll show them what happens when you corner 3 people who aren't ready to give up. Jenny's voice was steady as she asked, What's the plan? Survive the night, Marcus replied, his military training fully engaged. Protect each other, and prove to these bastards that they picked the wrong family to mess with. As if in response, another explosion lit up the darkness. The siege of the Hartwell Ranch had begun, and it would take everything they had. All of Marcus's special forces training, all of Benny's careful planning, and all of Jenny's determination to make it through the night alive. Marcus's heart stopped when he saw his grandfather crumple to the ground, blood spreading across his chest. Through his scope, he watched Benny fall behind the barn's corner, out of sight. No! The word tore from his throat. Without hesitation, Marcus shouldered his rifle and moved. Years of Special Forces training took over as he slipped through the shadows toward the Iron Wolves' compound. His mind focused with crystal clarity, every movement precise, every step calculated. The gang had pulled most of their forces back to their makeshift headquarters in the old Morrison barn half a mile down the road. Marcus counted 8 motorcycles outside. His rage burned cold and controlled as he worked his way through the surrounding woods. 2 sentries stood guard, their attention focused outward. Marcus moved like a ghost, using the skills honed in a dozen war zones. The first guard went down silently, a precise chokehold rendering him unconscious. The second never saw Marcus coming. Inside the barn, voices echoed. Marcus identified Dante Reeves's distinctive growl giving orders. Climbing to the hayloft, Marcus prepared to rain down hell on the men who had shot his grandfather. That's when a familiar voice crackled in his earpiece. "Taking an awful risk there, soldier boy." Marcus froze. "Grandpa? Who else would it be?" Benny's dry tone carried clearly through the radio. "You really think these yahoos could get the drop on me that easy?" "I saw you get hit," Marcus whispered, his heart pounding with relief and confusion. "Blood pack under my shirt. Old theater trick Jenny helped me rig up." Benny chuckled softly. "Figured they'd pull their forces back if they thought they'd finally got me? Wanted to draw them away from the ranch house?" Marcus shook his head, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. "You crafty old man. Learned a few things in my time. Now you got eyes on the interior?" "Affirmative. 8 hostiles inside, 2 unconscious outside. Dante's here." "Good. I'm coming in from the south side. Remember that creek bed that runs behind the property? The one with the steep banks?" Marcus watched through a gap in the boards as the gang members moved below. "That's the one. Used to use it for moving cattle unseen. Works just as well for sneaking up on drug runners." There was a pause. "You still remember those hand signals I taught you when you were 10? Marcus's throat tightened at the memory of summer days spent playing soldier with his grandfather. "Every single one." "Then let's show these boys what happens when they mess with the Hartwells." Working together, grandfather and grandson executed a perfectly coordinated attack. Marcus dropped smoke grenades through the hayloft while Benny breached the rear door. The gang members, caught completely off guard, found themselves trapped between 2 deadly opponents. Marcus moved with military precision, each shot carefully placed. But it was Benny who truly surprised him. The old rancher moved with the sure-footed confidence of someone who knew every board and beam. He used the barn's layout like a weapon, herding gang members into Marcus's line of fire. "Behind you!" Benny's warning came just as Marcus sensed movement. He spun, catching a gang member trying to flank him. Before Marcus could shoot, Benny's rifle cracked, and the threat disappeared. "Just like teaching you to herd cattle," Benny called out, "except these ones are a lot uglier." Working in perfect sync, they systematically took down the Iron Wolves. Marcus's tactical training complemented Benny's intimate knowledge of the terrain. When Dante tried to escape through a hidden door, Benny was already there, having anticipated the move. "Always knew that old loading chute would come in handy," Benny said as he covered Dante with his rifle, though usually it was for more respectable livestock. As they secured the survivors, Marcus looked at his grandfather with new respect. The past 5 years of distance and anger seemed to fade in the face of their shared victory. "That hand signal for flanking left was a little sloppy," Benny commented as they zip-tied the last gang member. "You're out of practice." Marcus laughed. "Well, maybe I need a refresher course. Might be able to arrange that." Benny's eyes twinkled. "If you're planning to stick around a while." Their eyes met in understanding. Some bonds, like those between grandfather and grandson, couldn't be broken by time or distance. They could only be strengthened by facing challenges together. "The ranch could use another pair of hands," Marcus said carefully. especially ones that remember how to fix fence posts the right way. You mean the way I taught you? Benny raised an eyebrow. Thought you'd forgotten all that? Never forgot, Grandpa. Marcus helped his grandfather secure the last restraints. Just took me a while to remember what's important. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Jenny had called in the state police as planned. Grandfather and grandson stood together, their shared victory representing more than just the defeat of the Iron Wolves. It was the restoration of something precious that both had feared was lost forever. Marcus froze at the sound of his grandfather's voice in his earpiece. His hands tightened on his rifle, as confusion and relief warred inside him. "You're alive?" he whispered. "Course I am." Benny's voice crackled back. "Needed to draw them out, didn't I?" "Been planning this for months." Before Marcus could respond, commotion erupted below. Through a gap in the floorboards, he saw Dante Reeves dragging Jenny into the barn, his arm locked around her throat. "I know you're out there, Hartwell," Dante shouted. "Show yourself, or the vet gets it." Jenny struggled against Dante's grip, her eyes fierce, despite her fear. Marcus's finger tensed on the trigger, but the angle was wrong. He couldn't get a clean shot without risking Jenny. "Your grandfather's little evidence collection is going to disappear," Dante continued, pressing his gun against Jenny's temple. "Along with anyone who knows about it." "Marcus?" Benny's voice was steady in his ear. "Trust me one more time, son. Like you used to." Those words hit Marcus hard, reminding him of days spent learning to track cattle with his grandfather, of quiet lessons about patience and timing. Before the argument that tore them apart, before he'd chosen the military over the ranch. "What's your play?" Marcus whispered. "When you hear the explosion, be ready." "And Marcus, I'm proud of how you turned out, soldier or not." Marcus blinked back unexpected tears, his throat tight. Below, Jenny caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. She'd spotted him and was ready to move. The explosion rocked the barn's foundation. Through the windows, Marcus saw flames erupting from the fuel depot at the compound's edge, Benny's diversion. In the chaos, Jenny drove her elbow back into Dante's solar plexus and dropped to the ground. Marcus didn't hesitate. He swung down from the loft, landing behind Dante as the gang leader raised his gun. 2 precise strikes disarmed him, followed by a sweep that took Dante's legs out from under him. Sirens wailed in the distance as Marcus secured Dante with zip ties. Jenny scrambled to her feet as federal agents swarmed the compound, their raids perfectly timed with Benny's intelligence. "Nobody move." Deputy Chief Vasquez burst through the door, gun drawn. "I wouldn't," Benny's voice rang out. The old rancher stood in the doorway, rifle trained on his corrupt half-brother. "Federal agents have copies of every meeting I recorded between you and Dante, every drug shipment, every bribe." Vasquez's face twisted with rage as agents surrounded him. "You played us," he spat. "All this time, acting weak, letting us think we had you beaten." "Never underestimate an old rancher with nothing left to lose," Benny said. "Except it turns out I had more to gain than I thought." His eyes met Marcus's with warmth that bridged their years of separation. As agents led away Dante Vasquez and the rest of the Iron Wolves network, Marcus helped Jenny to her feet. She leaned against him, trembling now that the danger had passed. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, then surprised him with a fierce kiss. "I am now." Later that evening, Marcus stood with Benny on the ranch house porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. 5 years of pain and misunderstanding hung between them, but somehow felt lighter now. "Ranch needs a lot of work," Benny said carefully. "Fences to mend, barn to rebuild." "Seems like a 2-man job," Marcus replied. 3, if you count Jenny. She's out there checking the cattle now. Girl knows her way around the land. Marcus smiled, watching Jenny's distant figure moving among the herd. "I was thinking of staying," he said. "If you'll have me." Benny's weathered hand gripped his shoulder. "Welcome home, son." Looking out over the ranch, past the scars of battle to the beauty beneath, Marcus felt pieces of his life clicking into place. This wasn't just about preserving his grandfather's legacy anymore. With Jenny's love and Benny's hard-won wisdom, it was about building something new, something worth protecting. The land stretched out before him, no longer a reminder of what he'd left behind, but a promise of what lay ahead. Here, where his military skills had helped save his family's heritage, he could create a future that honored both who he'd been and who he'd become. As the sun sank behind the mountains, Marcus knew he'd found his way back to more than just the ranch. He'd found his way back to family, to love, and to himself. Thanks for spending a moment here with me. If this story touched you, let's keep this connection going. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.